Didn't think it would be a big deal. Did some performance upgrades. Didn't upgrade the crank hub. Spun my crank hub and blew my motor. So now I have a very expensive paperweight.
Perfect.
So for those of you that are new to the S55 platform, or you're just getting to know some of the problems that we have, the piece that I'm specifically talking about would be this right here. This is my stock crank hub. This is the crank hub here, and the reason why it fails is because when you put extra power down, basically you have a bolt that goes through the center of this and holds these pieces together, along with some friction discs that are attached to the ends of these. Basically, these all spin together. And the reason that it fails is because when you start to put down extra power, and in some rare cases with a stock motor where you're doing heavy downshifts and such, these will end up spinning independently from each other, knocking off your timing and causing catastrophic issues. So the fix for this that they've come out with is a few different things. They've done a spline lock, which I'm not too familiar with, but to my understanding, it basically puts a lock that helps hold these together. And then another solution, which is the one that I went with, which is the 2-pin single unit solution, which means this here is going to be one solid unit, so they're no longer going to be separate pieces. And then on top of that, it has 2 pins. The 2 pins sit on top of here. You drill them into your actual hub, and then they lock in. That way that there's a little bit more of a secureness when you're actually putting power down to make sure that this does not spin independently, causing any type of timing issues or engine failure. And you also have the more extreme solution, which is a 4-pin crank hub. Basically the same thing as the 2-pin solid unit. You're gonna have 4 pins on top, and you're gonna have to drill 4 holes into your hub, making sure that that locks into place. So before I get into which of the options I think is the best option, first I wanna go over why you should do it. So in my opinion, obviously I'm on the side of actually doing the crank hub fix, or at least reinforcing it in some way. I do think that the engineering behind the original crank hub design being 2 pieces, I did speak with Brendan at EuroMpire, and he kind of went over some of the engineering aspects. And from a serviceability standpoint, assuming that you do keep your car completely stock, it does actually have a lot of serviceability benefits. But for most people, you're buying an M car, you're most likely not gonna keep it stock. If you do keep it stock, obviously these are M cars. No one out here is a stranger to this. We're obviously gonna beat on these cars. We're gonna drive these hard on the road. You guys know that we're gonna end up downshifting excessively, putting down the power where we can, and having fun as the cars were meant to be. So being said, I would put the category of people into 3 groups that are gonna own this car. First, I would put it into the person who is all about keeping it OEM. They like the car for what it stands for. They enjoy the car for its sportiness, but ultimately they're driving it casually. They're not beating on the car. They're not putting down the power as much as they want to. They're not dropping into low gears and doing hard pulls. They're not doing donuts, burnouts. They're not doing any of that. They're just casually driving the car and enjoying it for what it is. The second group of people, I would say, are the ones that are gonna keep the car stock for what it is. I mean, it's a 420 horsepower car stock. Plenty of power for sure. That type of person is gonna keep the car stock. They're gonna, of course, do everything the first person does. They're gonna enjoy it for what it is. Probably not gonna drive it excessively hard, but that type of person is also gonna be the one that uses the stock power to its advantage. Push it to its limits, to its stock limits, and they're gonna enjoy a very high performance sports car. They're gonna do a casual burnout, a casual donut. They're gonna do some excessive street driving with its stock form, and they're gonna play it safe, but they're gonna have fun. Then I would put the third category of people as in the ones that are going to modify. They're the ones where the stock power is not enough. The next power level gets boring, and the third power level just gets exciting the further that you get. That category of person is gonna push the car to its absolute limits. They're gonna enjoy the car's platform, and they're gonna build off of the base that the S55 brings to the table. All the benefits that you get with that high performance motor, the increased suspension, as well as all of the lightweight body parts that this car comes with. They're gonna use all of that, they're gonna tune the car, they're gonna add performance parts, and they're gonna see how much power they can put down, and most likely that's gonna be paired with some excessive and aggressive driving on the road, track, back roads, what may have you, but they're gonna be driving this car, and the car is going to love every bit of it. I would say between these three groups of people, there's an option for each. I'm gonna kind of go over where I think I lie, as well as where I kind of think what your options should be for what you're doing. So anybody who is familiar with the S55 platform, or just the BMW M3 M4 and M2 comp that the S55 comes with, if you are anywhere on the forums, groups, you've got friends with these cars, you guys know that do the crank hub, don't do the crank hub. You guys already know this is a topic that is literally beaten like a dead horse. I feel like my opinion kind of narrows it down a little bit more, may be able to give a little bit of a different perspective. Like I said, I think categorizing someone into those three main groups and deciding from there what is best fitting their driving process and what they're going to be using the car for, I think can help you decide whether you think that the crank hub is something that you should do, because it's not a cheap upgrade. I mean, I think that the average crank hub cost is anywhere between $2,500 to $4,000, parts, labor, all mixed in there, plus or minus. There's always going to be changes based on the area, but ultimately this is not a cheap thing that you can do. But again, this isn't a cheap car. These cars are meant to be high performance machines, and sometimes they do require high maintenance, expensive things that you do have to do. And I would definitely put this in the category of an expensive maintenance piece. All right, so I've kind of gone over what the three categories I think of drivers there are. I've gone over the three main fixes that they have for this issue, and now I'm gonna kind of fit everybody kind of into the group that I think that they would fall under. So first, I want to preface this with, if you're going to have the crank hub work done, you have to recognize that the majority of this work is labor. In my next video, where we fully tear apart my car to get in there and actually upgrade the crank hub to the 2-pin crank hub, you're gonna see the amount of intense work it takes to actually get in there to fix the crank hub, which is why it's expensive. It's majority labor. The part itself, for like a 2-pin crank hub, you're looking at right around $1,000. The other $3,000-ish is really just labor. It takes about 25 hours, I believe, is what is the BMW recommended time that it takes to actually do this task. So we'll start with our driver group number one, which I would say, again, is going to be your keep it stock. They like the car for what it is. They're not gonna drive it hard. They're gonna enjoy it for the little bits, and they're gonna basically keep the car as is and just enjoy it. Casual driving, there's not gonna be any excessive downshifts. They're gonna mainly get on the gas on the interstate, enjoy it, but ultimately they're not doing any racing. They're not hitting this thing on the track. They're not doing any type of performance upgrades. They're keeping it as is and just enjoying it as it came from the factory. So this category, being someone who's not gonna be doing any heavy downshifts, DCT or manual, I do not believe that this person should do the crank hub fix. In most cases, this person is gonna be just casually driving the car. You're not gonna have to worry about doing a heavy downshift and the excess power hitting all at once, spinning that crank hub. Someone who's just driving it casually and enjoying the car for what it is, keeping it fully stock, they're not gonna have many issues. Granted, there will be some, but for the odds, if you're driving it like that, the most likely you're not gonna have any crank hub issues. So for that casual driver that's just keeping the car as it is, I say that doing the crank hub would be a waste of money. I don't think that you're putting enough pressure on the hub itself to take any chances of it spinning. Moving on to our second group, I think, like I said, the second group is the person who's gonna keep the car completely stock, but they're gonna drive it aggressively. They're gonna drive it for what this car was built for, to be a driver's car. They're gonna drive it hard every now and then, and they're not driving the car and just like beating on it, but they are enjoying it for the 420 horsepower monster that it is straight from the factory, and they're gonna enjoy it in that space. For that person, I would say that at minimum, you should be doing the spline lock to make sure that you're getting some form of extra protection, because you are casually and sometimes gonna be putting some actual pressure on that hub, and the last thing you want is for that to spin. I do believe that a driver that is in that casual driving, but sometimes is gonna drive it aggressively for what it is, I do think the person in that category would also be someone who should consider a 2-pin option with a single piece crank up. I think that it really just gives you that extra peace of mind. If you're gonna go out there, let the car warm up, you're gonna get on a back road, you're gonna drop it in second gear to pull off, and you're gonna rip it through the back roads. Even if you're doing that once in a while, just imagine that one time. That one time is all it is gonna take, and you're gonna spin your crank up and you're gonna have a paperweight. Best case scenario, your engine seizes up and you just have minor issues, but God forbid the worst happens and you have a dead engine and a paperweight. That is probably the most gut-wrenching feeling to have such an expensive motor. I mean, the S55 motor is not cheap to replace. Absolutely not cheap to replace. And that is not something that I ever want to go through. So for this category of the person who's gonna keep the car completely stock but may drive it aggressively once in a while, I would suggest either a spline lock or a 2-pin single crank up option. I think that if you're gonna be putting even the minor amount of pressure on the crank up, you should be replacing it to something a little bit more stable. Once again, this is an expensive car. It's gonna require some expensive maintenance. And this is a one and done thing in most cases. You're gonna do this and you're gonna be done. And last but not least, moving on to what I would categorize your third driver category. That's gonna be the person that is going to customize the car. They're gonna tune the car. They're gonna add the performance mods. They may take it to the track every now and they may not, but ultimately they're putting the car and they're turning it up. They're adding some extra power to it, whether it be through a tune, performance parts, meth, whatever may have it, whatever they're adding to the car, they're making sure that they're optimizing the most performance out of this car and utilizing the S55 platform for what it was made to do, and that's put some power down to the wheels. This category of person I feel like can most relate to this problem and would be most open to actually doing the crank up fix. I think it would be absolutely crazy to actually put in stage 2 plus or more on this car without doing some form of crank up fix. For this category, someone who's gonna be regularly driving the car aggressively, hitting the back roads, possibly hitting the track, excessive downshifts, really just enjoying the car to its fullest. This category, I absolutely 100% would recommend a 2-pin single piece crank hub at the minimum. There is the 4-pin crank hub option, which you can do. Personally, I believe the 2-pin crank hub is all you need, at least sub 800 horsepower. So that kind of summarizes where I think you would fall under based on your driving tendencies and what I think that you should personally do if you're falling in any of those categories. So I'd like to kind of go back to kind of the labor discussion around this to kind of express what my opinion is. If you're gonna be paying for the majority of the labor to get down there to the crank hub, I wouldn't even bother with a spline lock, honestly. My personal opinion is if you're gonna do it one time and be done with it. And I think that the ultimate way to do it is gonna be a single piece 2-pin crank hub. I think that that is gonna be your best route, and this is why. For the next option, I know a lot of people are saying,
well, if I'm gonna go in there and I'm gonna pay for the labor, like you said, and I'm gonna be in there anyways, why would I not do a 4-pin crank hub and just give me extra protection?
I'll tell you why. So I've done a lot of talking with Matt, who's the owner of EuroMpire, as well as Brendan, who's a technician there. Matt, of course, is a master tech, and you know, we've gone back and forth and talked about it, and he makes a lot of great points about the 4-pin. You're drilling holes into your hub when you're putting these in there. So just think, every time you drill into anything, you're weakening it in some way, shape, or form. And within that small space, the small ring that you're actually putting those pins in there, putting 4 in, I think, is just a little bit excessive and may end up weakening it over time. I think 2-pin, being that they're completely, of course, spread out, is gonna be your ultimate power to protection to safety aspect that's gonna give you the good performance that you need. I don't think that a 4-pin is really needed. I don't personally know anyone who's ever spun a single piece 2-pin crank hub. I haven't seen anything on the forums. And I mean, unless you're putting down excessive power. I mean, if you're putting down a ton of power and you're really hitting it, then, you know, things can happen, nothing's impossible, but for the most part, your single piece 2-pin crank hub is really gonna be all you need. The 4-pin, most people think it's gonna give extra protection. I personally, as well as a few others, kind of agree. It is gonna kind of weaken your hub putting 4 holes in there. Ultimately, if you don't put those 4 holes in correctly, then you're really in trouble. So I definitely recommend, number 1 choice, If you're gonna do it right. Don't overdo it. There's no need to. I think the single piece 2-pin crank up, in my opinion, is your best route, especially if you're gonna pay for the labor to do some type of fix. But I just want to kind of get on here, give you guys kind of my opinion, maybe stir up a little bit of thought process around it, maybe get some different perspectives on the topic. I think that categorizing people into those 3 driving types can really help you decide if upgrading the crank hub is right for you. Like I mentioned, it's something that if you're gonna do it, I would do it once, I'd do it right. These cars are expensive, and you know, honestly, sometimes you just have to bite the bullet, save up for it, and do the expensive preventative modifications that are gonna allow you to really enjoy the car in the long term. So in the next video, you guys are gonna see, we're actually gonna dive into the crank hub on the car. You guys are gonna see how much work really goes into that, so that you can see what you're actually paying for when you pay for that labor, because I will say it's pretty excessive. I was at the shop when they did the work the whole time. It's a lot, and you should definitely have a professional do this. This is, in my opinion, not a DIY. Granted, I know people that have done it. I know people that have done it themselves. So I know it can be done. But for most people, I will say, this is gonna be something you're gonna want a professional to do. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. I hope it sparked a little bit more of different thinking on what category you fall under, and I hope it helps you possibly decide whether the crank hub and doing the actual fix is the right decision for you based on your driving style. So hope I was able to help. If I was able to help you make your decision, please comment down below. I wanna know that what I'm doing is helping, what I'm doing is inspiring somebody in some way, shape, or form. Feel free to let me hear from you. If you guys are new to the channel, be sure to go down and hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. In the next videos, we're gonna be really diving into the car, and I'm gonna show you guys every piece of doing the crank hub, full bolt-ons. We're gonna be doing a tune as well, dyno time, everything. I'm gonna break it up into just a little bit digestible videos for you guys. So if you look forward to that and that's something that you think that you may wanna watch, be sure to go down, click the subscribe button if you're new, click the bell, be sure to like this video, throw down a comment. But as always, you guys know, I always appreciate you guys watching. But that is it for today. Next video is our performance. We're tearing the car apart fully, so be sure to look out for those videos. But that's it for today, guys. I'll see you guys in the next one.